Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's talk about audio production. I have a guest today, and that is Arya from IDDQD Sound, and we're gonna talk about audio production. And hi Arya, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. Excited to do this.
And it is something that you teach professionally, right?
Yeah, I teach, like, since the pandemic, I've been teaching kind of DAWs or just audio production to different people, like voiceover artists who are doing like audiobooks and stuff. I have one person who's doing like podcast production and recently switched to Reaper. Yeah, other people who want to kind of record their own music and stuff like that. Yeah, I've been doing that.
So how about we start with like a longer introduction. You establish your credentials. How do you learn all these things?
Okay. So I guess I started by playing music when I was like 14, so 2004. And I was in bands and stuff. And then later in life, I kind of got into Ableton and like a little bit of like electronic music production and MIDI and stuff, while still having bands. And then kind of slowly, I started to gravitate towards kind of behind the microphone. So yeah, so I was an assistant in a studio, and I was just like a runner, like running cables and stuff like that, and watching the producer their work. Then I went to university and I studied audio production. Um, then I did another degree in film sound, so like Foley and ADR, but also just the whole kind of post production workflow and 5.1 sound and stuff like that, field recordings, all that film audio stuff. And then I did a last degree in digital music production, which was more kind of based around synthesis, but also like recording. So I guess the first degree was more about like production, and the second degree was more about recording. Yeah, and but also I guess other than degrees, I just learned so much throughout the years from like YouTube videos and just from watching people do their thing in different studios that I was at. Yeah, so I would say I learned an equal amount from YouTube, even though I spent maybe, let's see, 7 years studying audio.
You talk about credentials, man. It's like you live in my parallel universe. If I had not gone to computer science and became a programmer or a computer scientist, I would have done the things that you did. I would really like to have that experience of being in the studio and working in film and all these areas. Like, it sounds fascinating. And uh,
It's really fun.
and what do you do mostly these days? Do you work in studios? Do you teach? You do everything?
Yeah, I do whatever people can pay me to do these days. So yeah, teaching, I guess, the most regular gig that I have, weekly, like a few students. But yeah, then the rest kind of changes. So currently, I'm working on a couple of films as sound editor, and I'm working as a composer on another film. I don't have any music projects right now. I've finished recording my own album, and that's being produced by somebody else. So I'm just kind of waiting on that right now. But yeah, it changes through time. Like I can do a lot of different things. I also like write jingles and edit podcasts and stuff like that. So kind of whatever comes, um, that's what I end up doing. And it's very seasonal. So I've noticed like in the winter you get a lot of music projects, and then the summer you get a lot of film.
What is the music industry and the film industry these days with the pandemic? Did they halt productions or are they doing it somehow?
Like on the very kind of high level of the industry, Yeah, they're doing it. Like they got the money, if they're doing like film set work, like production work, they are testing everybody, testing the whole crew, testing all the actors regularly, and they're just shooting movies like any other time. And early on, this was different. Like early on, nobody knew what to do, but kind of since it's been more than a year, I think like they figured out perfectly how to just work under these circumstances. But lower budget stuff, obviously, yeah, it's a lot more slow. If you're making an indie film, like paying people from out of your pocket, it's really hard to like also pay for people to get tested. um, and it's just really hard to get permits if you want to shoot on different locations, especially. And again, kind of city from city, it really changes. I think in LA you can get permits and shoot wherever, but in Canada it's different. And a lot of people that are doing like animation and stuff, those things are actually kind of on the rise because people can make animations anytime, people can record their voiceovers online. um, yeah, so I think those things are kind of on the rise. But yeah, like at the level I'm at, where it's like the lower level, like nobody's giving me a Marvel film to mix. Yeah, it's definitely slower.
Ah. And how do you even get into this market? One of the things that made me go to computer science as opposed to audio production is that I thought it would be difficult to get into the market and it would be difficult to find uh, the gigs. And how do you navigate around this? How do you do this professionally?
Mm, it's really hard, and I've definitely like since I decided kind of to go professional with this, I've always struggled financially to a certain extent. Whenever I didn't struggle financially was because of like the teaching gigs, the kind of side things that I was doing. That was doing a lot of the like paying of the bills. And it pays really well, but the pay is very erratic. So you get, in terms of kind of like how much you get paid per hour, you can quite easily get gigs that pay you like $100 an hour, which is really nice. But it's not like you're doing that 40 hours a week. You do that for a month, and then for 6 or 7 months, nothing comes. In terms like, yeah, how to get in is also really hard. I wouldn't say I'm even 100% in. So I have like a few connections, and through those I get some things. I have the website. I advertise through that. I have my a bunch of gigs on Fiverr and Upwork and stuff like that. So I get some freelance work that way. But it's just a constant big kind of grind. Like I also just from Facebook groups, LinkedIn, all over the place. I'm constantly messaging people, like cold emailing, and I have never actually gotten. Maybe I've gotten, yeah, I think I've gotten zero jobs from cold emailing people, but I still do it. Because one day maybe something comes out of it. And then other than that, like in Canada, you can like look up what's shooting in Vancouver, BC, or what's shooting in Montreal, and then they'll show you all the movies that are in production. And then, so I always try to kind of reach out to those people because from when they're shooting the movie until when they're in post production, there's like a few months gap. So they probably haven't found a music composer. Maybe they don't have a Foley person. Maybe they don't have a dialogue editor. So I just kind of write them and I'm like, hey, if you need somebody, like I'm available. And actually with like lower budget films, sometimes they're like, oh yeah, that would be good. And they don't pay enough,
Mm.
like in terms of the hours you put in it, but they pay okay. So I guess to answer the question, like you got to prepare to be poor for a while or possibly have like a side job that's paying most of your bills. And it's a big grind. It's a lot of stuff that's really not comfortable to do for most people. Like I don't like to write people and be like, "Oh man, I'm great at all this stuff." Like, you know, and I also don't like to negotiate for prices. I just, I get excited about a film. I want to do it. Yeah, so it's a lot of like unpleasantness. I guess it's like work. You got to get it to a point where you're not really even, maybe you won't enjoy it anymore. But yeah, if it's a work, if it's like a line of work, you got to do it when you're not inspired. You got to do it all the time,
Yeah,
basically.
and that is something that happens. I think that your microphone is louder than mine. I should increase my gain. Since we are
Oh,
talking about audio production, I think it's okay for me to mention these kinds of things. So yeah, uh, uh, I guess a major part of this is the psychological aspect, and it's something that happens in every career. I love programming. I do it every day. I do it for fun too, in the streams and everything. But there are those days in which I'm like, I really don't want to do it, but I think that being a professional is doing the thing that you love even when you're not loving it. So I just go and write more code. And you just go and you produce more music and you edit more podcasts, that sort of thing. But I guess it's the same with every career. I mean,
exactly.
no career can be just fun. And even something that is just fun, it's not fun all the time. And how do you keep yourself motivated to
Yeah.
I have my own bag of tricks to go back to programming, but when I am working with audio and trying to produce music mainly, I know what a good song sounds like, and I'm trying to produce something and it doesn't sound like that, and I can only push so much through the frustration, and then at some point I go work on something else that is more immediately rewarding. And what are your bag of tricks to hear something that doesn't sound good and say, okay, I'm going to keep working on this, I'll get it better, instead of just abandoning it, which is something I find super common among producers, I think.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, well, I mean, I can talk about this for a long time, but I'll try to not talk about this for a long time. I guess when it comes to my own music that I'm like recording and most of the time I produce myself, I just give it time because like really there's no real rush. It's not like, oh, I gotta release this single or I can't pay my bills or anything like that. Nobody's really waiting for my music. So it's all like for me and for the sake of education. So I just give it time. If it's not sounding good, I just give it a day, another day. But I try to set a deadline for myself. Then when you're producing for other people, um, and especially like usually people these days are very specific, and usually people who are sending something to be produced, they have like a good amount of knowledge and they have a good idea of what they want their thing to sound like. So most of the time, if you manage to get the like perfect reference track, that's the thing they want, from there I can kind of reverse engineer like that exact sound basically. Um, but also, one thing that I always kind of do is, and this is the perfect thing to do whenever you don't feel like inspired, you just do stuff that are not important, that aren't going to be released. So whenever you're like not inspired, you go and you make a few synth presets, or you just record some voiceover and you try like 30 different plugins on it and see what you like. Then from that, you develop a bag of tricks that you can quickly recall when you have like a client. Because when you have a client, you have 2 days. You don't have time to experiment. So you do your experimentation on your off time and when you're uninspired and there's no jobs. And then when that job comes along, then I know, oh, like this plugin I used a long time ago, it just did something to the vocals. So that.
Yeah. And oh man, I have so many questions, but I want to read some of the comments in the chat. So Bo says another stream, cool. Hi. Hi Bo. It's nice to have you here.
Hi,
And
Bo.
Nathan says, I was doing convention hall work when I got out of audio engineering school. That paid well, but very erratic. I think that is a trend with many people. Um, yeah, it is difficult these days to work in the creative arts. That sort of space is always difficult, but it's also very rewarding, I think. It must be super nice to go to a theater and watch a movie that you helped make. I mean, I have never had that experience, but I imagine it feels awesome.
Yeah, it feels really good. Um, and yeah, like, so I guess like Nathan makes a good point too. Like, if you get like full-time work, like with a company, you can make really good money, and deservedly so. Like, you went to engineering school, you're doing something kind of very technical, so you can get paid really well. Um, and I always wanted to do that, but when I first arrived in Canada, I had like visa issues. I couldn't get like full-time work because they would have to like get me a work permit. They would have to spend extra money. And they would do it if I was like a whiz kid engineer, but just for a junior position, like they have 20 resumes that are exactly like mine, but they don't have to do any extra steps. So there was no real motivation for them to hire me. And then, so I got in the groove of kind of doing freelance work, and it's harder, but also it's nice because I make like 100% of the money. So now it's like hard to go back to like, working for a company, because then I'm so acutely aware of like how much money I'm making them versus how much I'm being paid to do it. That said, like if they hire me, I'll take those jobs because it just kind of reduces the stress. Um, yeah, and I applied for a few places when I came to Montreal, but also not speaking French, I guess, hurts a little. Um, but yeah, so if you can find like work at like a video game company or something like this, that's the dream.
So you're saying that it's not ideal, it's not the best, but if they offered you, you would take it.
Yeah, exactly. Because right now, I also would like to have stable income just to kind of like reduce the stress. I think freelance people, I don't know anybody freelance, especially since COVID, who's like, oh, yeah, no, I'm sitting pretty. Like, I'm not stressed at all. Like, everybody's super stressed. Everybody's like wondering when the next paycheck is coming. And then that kind of starts to take a toll on your like physical health and stuff. So I'm so used to like the stress of just being an audio person, but also now it's starting to like bleed into other aspects of my life, and I don't really want that. Like, I don't want my, back to start hurting forever, or I don't want like my friendships to go away because I'm like grinding audio tutorials or whatever, you
And
know?
oh man, I have so many questions. One thing that usually comes up is the value of higher education. And I went to college. I even spent a lot of time on a PhD that I ended up not getting. And to be honest, one of the reasons why I decided not to finish the PhD was that I didn't see a lot of value in what I was doing. I wanted to do the PhD because I wanted to be an educator, and then I realized the state of the education in the US. I was doing a PhD in the US, and it was like so messed up. And I did that same equation you mentioned. Like, I knew how much money I was making them versus how much money I was making, and that was frustrating. And education in general just seemed like such a bad business in terms of being evil that I decided to not do it. And now that I'm doing YouTube, I find it a lot more rewarding. But what is it like? And for computer science, I don't think that the diploma matters that much. I mean, it's hard to tell because I am in a privileged position of having a diploma, so maybe it's just a thing that I don't know that I don't know. But I don't think that having a diploma is so crucial in computer science. And people talk about the importance of having uh, formal education in audio production and in arts in general. What is your take on it?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit a while ago. Um, so my first university I went to, it was like a really cool music program where you could kind of choose your own adventure. So some people went into production, some people would go into like performance, jazz theory, whatever, and all of us are like mingling together. Um, so I would say like the big value of that is that you are suddenly connected to like 20 people in your city, your age, with more or less the same schedule as you, who have the same exact passion as you. So that's really valuable. You can never get that. You can get a semblance of that from like Discord and online communities, but it's never really exactly the same. So you have all these people, they're all super talented. They're all, or at least they're all as talented as you are, and you can start projects with them. And you can kind of see their mindsets. You can see the people who are doing certain things and they're not working, and you can see people who are like pulling ahead. So that's really valuable. And of course, like all the professors are amazing, all of those things. But ultimately, yeah, I think higher education is so much more about like getting a degree, which then gets you like a job interview versus like, oh, like teaching you something that it's impossible to learn on your own. And actually, like sometimes it can be totally like, I mean, our professors would also come in and they'd be like, okay, go watch this YouTube video, download this PDF like ebook, read that. And then, you know, like also just the way higher education is taught these days is so much using online resources. So you can definitely do it. I think one difference it makes is like here in Canada, I went to Vancouver Film School. Um, you know, some companies in Vancouver, like if you went to Vancouver Film School, then they'll open your resume. And if you didn't, they probably won't unless they know you somehow. So that kind of becomes more its value. And also just the value of, again, kind of doing work against deadlines. Somebody's pushing you to finish that song in a week or else. Somebody's pushing you to do 3 films in a month. So I think that's so much more the value. The content of what you're being taught, you can get all of that for free online and more than what even is possible to teach in a degree.
Yeah. So I know that you are now in the business of producing material that other people may use when they're teaching, because you have your YouTube videos and your blog posts. And first of all, how does that help you get those jobs? I mean, it is a form of advertising. You become the professional in the room. People watch you and they assume that you have that credibility, which may help find those jobs. Is this true? Is this one of the reasons why you even do this?
Yeah, it's I hope that that happens. I think my main reason when I first got into like doing tutorials was I wanted to kind of get good at video making, video editing, and doing all those things. Um, and yeah, um, I just always thought I'd have like I have a good way of explaining things, and I have like a way of retaining information. Um, so yeah, it was mostly those things, and I would then like kind of grow to realize that yeah, like this could also be a way of getting like jobs. I do regret, because I guess this is another thing where education becomes more important. Like if I ever wanted to become like a professor of whatever, then you need a PhD. I didn't get a PhD. So despite how much I like teaching, I feel like I have set a ceiling for myself in terms of where I can get as an educator. But I won't be able to teach in university. Maybe I can be a guest lecturer or something. Um, but I feel like, yeah, I've set that ceiling for myself. And yeah, I hope that people like, I know on LinkedIn, a few people wrote me and they were like, especially an old professor of mine wrote me and was like, yeah, I like what you're doing. Like, keep doing it. I see the quality improving and stuff. So that's nice. Yeah, I hope something comes out of that as
Do you
well.
think that you improved your video skills?
Yeah, I definitely have improved, and I'm also really stubborn, so I'm doing everything in Reaper. Uh, I've been making like little animations in Reaper that are excruciating to do, but it's just because like DaVinci crashed on me twice. So I was like, bye, I'm never using you again, DaVinci. And now I just stubbornly try to do everything in Reaper. But I think, yeah, I think I'm getting better at like not doing weird cuts. I still have like a pretty crappy camera to work with and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I'm getting better.
Yeah, and you want to know one of my tricks to do things when I'm not feeling like it? I promise people that I will.
Sure.
So that's why I have the streams, and before that I had the videos, and before that I was contributing to open source here and there. I would promise people that I would do something, and then I was like, okay, now these people are expecting me to. I mean, if I put a schedule that I'm going to stream every weekday for 1 hour, then I have to do it, and I have to come up with material for it. And like on Tuesdays we have these streams, and I was like, during the weekend I was like, I need to I need to go study EQs to not make a fool of myself on Tuesdays. So that's how I keep doing it. I just promise people that I will, which I guess is not exactly the same approach that you have, because you said that one of the things is that you don't have a schedule, and I try to force myself into one. Otherwise, I know that I will not do stuff.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I mean, that's exactly why I did the scripting tutorials. Because I've tried to learn to script before, like teach myself, but I'm just not disciplined. But, you know, like the musician, like the creative ego is such that you promise people something that like drives you to learn it. There's even sometimes like people have emailed me and they were like, "Oh, can you teach us Rewire?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess it's time to figure Rewire out." And then so that's nice. And also like through teaching, I feel like I gain a better understanding of stuff because like even if I know how something is done, then you start getting into, well, why? And then from there you figure out some more things.
That happens to me too, and I guess it happens to most people who teach. But I find that the most fascinating part is when you are in the middle of the explanation and then you start to understand things better as you were explaining. And that's something that has happened like yesterday and last week when I was explaining EQs. I came up with all these concepts, these better explanations for things that I was like, oh, that's cool. I couldn't have done this just by reading. I had to explain it to someone to get there.
Yeah, so true.
Speaking of teaching, how about we talk about some low level stuff, some gear? And I find that it's always fun to talk about gear, and it's a nice icebreaker, and it's a good way to start this learning process and to talk about the things that I want to learn from you and talk about in the stream. So, in terms of gear, I'll tell you a little bit of what I have here, and then you tell me how I can
Okay.
make the most of it, and what are the things that I'm doing wrong. So I thought that I would do something fun today. Usually I have this backdrop, it's all very organized, but
Mm-hmm.
today I'm going to do something different. So I have here my camera, a secondary camera,
Okay.
and I'm going to show you what it actually looks like, and we can all make fun of it. So
Ooh,
this,
cool, exciting.
so this is what it actually looks like in terms of audio production. I guess we can also talk about the video portion of it and OBS and whatnot, but let's start with the audio stuff. So what I have here in terms of audio is um, this is the microphone I'm using. This is a very standard piece of
Mm-hmm.
equipment that most people use, I guess. I mean, I see this being used in
Mm-hmm.
films
Mm-hmm.
and I mean all over the place. I One
Mm-hmm.
person that I really look up to on YouTube is Andrew Huang, and in his like cover picture,
Mm-hmm.
he has one of these. So, but it took me a long while to land
Mm-hmm.
on this. I tried many other things before, and one of the things I learned is that what makes the most difference, I think, is not this. It's not the microphone. It is the room. So that's why there is this ridiculous piece
Mm-hmm.
here. There is more ridiculous stuff behind me. I mean, the room is ridiculous all over. I mean, look at these lights. uh,
Mm-hmm. That's a
yeah,
nice
I mean,
line.
it's everything in here. I used to record in this same room, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't like having stuff, so I had nothing in the room. It was an echo chamber, and if you go watch my
Mm-hmm.
previous videos, my early videos on YouTube, it's super echoey. It sounds terrible. And one thing that I learned is that putting these moving blankets on the walls and having a mattress behind me, that helps a lot. But and this is you, by the
Mm-hmm.
way.
Hey, me in the there.
But I am sure that there are things that I could do to improve the audio. I mean, in terms of the microphone in the room. So, what is your advice for people who are
Mm-hmm.
doing things like we are doing? We are talking on camera, doing YouTube, very straightforward. We are not on, um, uh, we are not somewhere outside. So, it's probably the ideal scenario for recording. I mean, it's controlled and it is relatively quiet when the
Mm-hmm.
baby is sleeping. So,
Mm-hmm.
what is your advice for someone who wants to do this sort of thing? And what are the tricks of the trade that you are
Mm-hmm.
using yourself?
Mm-hmm. Um, I guess first of all, like, yeah, your videos sound really nice. And that mic is awesome. I love all the Zoom products. I have one myself. Maybe later I'll show you. Um, yeah, and I think yeah, you definitely have even better treatment in your room than I do. So I just, it's like a living room, and our house is a rental, so I didn't want to like spend money soundproofing it at all, and like doing any kind of treatment, because yeah, it's a rental, and we're gonna be back in Vancouver next year, and hopefully, if we like, once we settle down there, I'll be able to get like acoustic treatment for my room. But right now, totally not treatment. So you always kind of find things in your space that will not be ideal, and that'll be the same for so many people recording at home. Um, and yeah, so you've done a lot of like the at-home treatment stuff. So the curtains, the mattress behind you, all of that is awesome. Another thing that's just an incredibly good like acoustic treatment is bookshelves with books in them. Because books exactly work like any kind of diffuser. They are all different shapes and sizes and heights and dimensions. So sound hits them and it gets reflected like in weird ways. So bookcase behind you, like that's perfect. And like tiny desk and NPR tiny desk. It's like such a good sounding room because of all the books. So books are really helpful. Um, Another thing you can do is kind of using the polar pattern of your mic to make a smaller room inside your room. And you can even go further so in your room, for example, you have a room, it's not too big. Um, but so if you turned your table around and if you pointed your mic towards one corner of the room and put a mattress like behind you, then you've kind of essentially created a smaller room within a room. And so I have like this mic, and I can use this mic kind of to my advantage because from the back it doesn't pick up a lot of stuff. So theoretically, if I flipped my table like 180 degrees and there was just a wall behind me, then all this echo that you hear kind of from the door and the window behind me, you wouldn't hear it anymore. So yeah, like using the polar pattern of your mic to point it to a small corner of the room really helps because then everything behind that is like negligible in terms of the noise you're getting and in terms of like the echoes you're picking up. And you just have like this little corner. Um, but yeah, that said, like I think your sound setup right now is perfect. Like fully understandable, sounds good, sounds loud enough. Even mine is very not ideal, but it's definitely good enough for like a tutorial. I've always felt. So I never felt like I should even like make my space like turn stuff around just to be, you know, like create more isolation. I just do it the way it is. And my mic helps because my mic's dynamic and it's got, we'll get into polar patterns and stuff, I'm sure, in a second. Yeah, it doesn't pick up too much from the back. And the downside is if I move a little bit away from it, you start not hearing me so well. So I got to try to remain in more or less like, this area. I can't go too far back. And if I get too close to it, that also sounds weird. But on the plus side, it's not picking up all the stuff that's happening around us.
What is the point of being in the corner? Why do you say to put myself in the corner as opposed? I mean, I am parallel to one of the walls. I'm sitting in the middle of the room. But you're saying that I understand that putting the mattress behind me will help, which is counterintuitive, by the way. I would always, and I did it for the longest while, I would put all the absorption in front of me because that's where I'm projecting my voice. But it seems like it makes more sense to cater to the microphone and put the absorbing stuff behind me because that's where the reflections that come from behind me will go into the mic. Is that true?
Exactly. Yeah. You're always tailoring to the mic because yeah, your voice is like traveling all around the place. And yeah, your voice definitely first hit the wall in front of you. And it will be its loudest kind of reflection in front, but your mic has its back to that. So it's not picking up as much. And I'm actually not sure that mic may be omnidirectional. I've used the H4n before, but I don't know if that boom attachment, if it's fully omni or is it cardioid. We can look that up as well.
Yeah, we can talk about this. I mean, I can switch back to this scene, which happens to also make you bigger on the screen. I don't know why. But in any case, so when I bought this, it was advertised as a shotgun mic, which has a polar pattern that... So let's talk about polar patterns. As far as I understand, what a polar pattern is you take a speaker and you make constant sound, like a sine wave, and then you rotate the microphone around, and you get a graph of how much sound it picks when it's addressed from the front and how much sound it's being picked up when you're addressing it from the sides and from behind. And this microphone supposedly has, I have not tested myself, but it supposedly has a polar pattern or a pickup pattern that is a shotgun. So it goes, the longest axis is in the front, and then on the sides and on the back, it's not supposed to pick too much. Is that right?
Yeah, if it's a shotgun mic, yeah, shotgun mics usually are cardioid pattern, and yeah, you explained polar patterns perfectly. So yeah, and I mean you can even test it right now, like just kind of as you speak, like rotate the mic and see what we hear.
Yeah, so I'll try to make a constant level of sound here. Yeah, I can definitely tell the difference in the meter. I don't know if people who are watching this will be able to tell. I mean, when you were moving around, we couldn't really tell the difference because of Skype compressing the audio and then YouTube compressing the audio again, supposedly, I think. But I don't know if people... That's unfortunate about discussing audio production when we are doing a live stream, but it's just the nature of the game. But I think that you were able to hear that it got quieter when I moved it like this. And now all you can hear is just me being reflected in the rest of the room. It's supposed not to be too loud, right?
Exactly. It's definitely quieter, and then it always also, there's a frequency discrimination as well. So as you turn things around, like the back of the polar pattern, obviously low-end sounds are less sensitive to polar patterns because they can always kind of wrap their way around to the front. Higher frequencies start to decay earlier. But yeah, as you were turning around, you could also feel like the voice that's being picked up is like the reflection and not the direct voice. And yeah, like you were saying, like how does being in the corner help? So with a room of your size, maybe it wouldn't be too big of a change. But like in the space I'm in right now, and let me actually move my thing around. And sorry if my house is a little messy.
Well, you have seen mine, so
But
I mean,
so
is there?
this
You
is the
have worked in
front.
studios before, and I have not. Is there any studio that is like super well organized and clean? Because every the idea that I have of a studio is that it's like my room. The parts that you see are kind of okay, but what you don't see is a mess.
Yeah, if a studio is clean, that means they've not been working. They've not been getting paid. That's what I've always felt. Yeah, so like I have a somewhat large space like right there. That's like the dining area, and then this is the living room, and this is a somewhat large area. And then there's this brick wall right here, and then I'm kind of in the corner of this room. And my choice of kind of placement for the actual so my choice of placement for where I'm sat is more aesthetic than sound based. If I was making a choice based on sound, I would flip my table around and I would then, my desk would be here just 180 degrees. So I then, by putting my mic in front of it with the back towards the larger area in the room, eliminating all that reflection stuff, and I'm just getting a very kind of direct sound that's only my dry sound. So think of how, like, when the back of your mic is to a large space, it kind of makes that space smaller, brings everything kind of closer. It closes out the space. You know what I
That
mean?
is cool.
And hmm
It's something
and
that
those shotgun mics.
I have never heard anyone saying this on YouTube before. I mean, one thing you have to know about me
hmm
is that I have watched the entirety of YouTube on audio production because
Oh,
I
cool.
am obsessed with this, and I have been obsessed with this for the longest while. I mean,
hmm
go talk to my wife about it. She knows about compressors and EQs more than she would like to, and uh, yeah, I guess that's another question. How do you stop being obsessed about the thing and just go ahead and do it and publish? And you will be embarrassed about it, or not, maybe not now, but in the future you probably will. But you put it out anyway. How do you get around that struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm embarrassed by almost everything that I've released that has been released like more than 4 months ago. And I genuinely am. Like, I genuinely go back and listen to like my old music. Like, this sounds horrible. And actually, there's a click here. And I just didn't hear any of that. And it's too quiet and it's too muffled. But I do it because, I mean, like, who cares? Like, but also, like, one thing I'm an advocate of is once, like, a recording of a song, let's just talk about songs. When you release a song, that you can think of that as like this thing that needs to be polished and perfect. I just think about it as one performance of my song. It's just one take. That's the take that happens to be on SoundCloud. You come see me live, every time it'll be different. Like, it's okay for me. And also I feel like when I release stuff, and if it's time to release the thing, maybe there's 10 more tricks I want to try. I can always try those on the next song. So I just let it go. And I think it's also, for me at least, I've definitely released stuff too early, but that's just the way like my brain works. Like, once I start losing interest in something, then I'm like, it's better if it's out there, because if I keep working on this, I'll delete all of it. Um, and this happened to me actually recently with one of my tutorials. I did like a 1 hour tutorial explaining everything about Reaper, left it for a couple of days, came back to it, hated the whole thing, deleted it. So I try to like have one session, right? And like produce and record the whole thing and send it out before I have a chance to hate it. Um,
I guess that's another reason why I
Yeah.
am doing more streams and fewer videos these days. But the unfortunate thing about my workflow is that I tend not to delete. I tend to think, I'm going to work more on this later and I'll make it better. So I have a big stash of files on my file system that it's just a bag of anxiety at this point. I know I will never finish those projects, but they are still there because someday I may finish those projects. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Give yourself like a challenge. So I guess, the same thing you were saying, like by doing the regular schedule streaming, you're motivating yourself. So do the same thing, like announce to the world that, hey, I'm going to release a song in a week. And whatever happens, you just do it in a week. And if it's bad, that's fine. You kept your promise.
Yeah, I guess the promise is that I will work with you in these streams to uh, work on some things. I'm not sure I'm going to work on music. We may, or we may work on other
Mm-hmm.
things, but I'm going to work on these things on the stream too, and I think that that will help.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you be up for recording? Maybe not a full song, but just uh, maybe a short jingle or something, and
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah.
we could engineer it together, and you help me do it.
Sure, yeah, sounds awesome. Yeah, and we'll run into some things and we'll talk about them. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, I always like to
Um,
watch people
and yeah,
working, so I find that we could do that.
hmm sure, yeah. And yeah, you're like the voice that you're outputting, at least now. I do remember like your earlier videos having a little more reflection, and still, to me, that's more than fine. Um, but yeah, like the voice you're outputting right now sounds really good. And it's one of those things, I think film helps because when I was like, I've done a lot of production sound gigs where I'm like the boom operator. So you're always recording in environments that are so far from optimal, so far from even being like okay. So what you do is, well, first of all, there's ADR and post production and all that stuff. But you kind of realize it's so much more about like how much more you can do with a mic versus to a space. You can do a lot to a space, and if it's possible, you should. But short of that, just like pointing the mic really kind of tight towards a person, that helps so much. So your mic is really close to you, and that's great. It's picking up most of the sound from the front, right from your mouth. And it's picking up the reflections, but they're much quieter. They kind of get tucked under. And like it becomes also a matter of like, oh, we don't want pristine audio. We just want intelligible audio. Like in a film, if you get, as long as you can understand what was said, you've won the battle. And they'll write you and they're like, wow, great sound. It's like, really? It sounded awful in there, but it's intelligible.
And yeah, so do you watch your old videos? Do you go over your old YouTube videos and do you have the stomach for that? Because I don't. I cannot watch my own videos. Your
Yeah,
videos are
I
okay. I can watch
do.
your old videos just fine. I'm talking about my own.
No, I do, and I cringe, but I do it. You got to do it, and yeah, I think with everything, I do a lot of like self critique, and it's actually sometimes bad for me. It can really kind of be bad for my like mental health and just spirit to constantly be like self critiquing. But I think, yeah, that's what people do. So if you're a football player, you film yourself and you watch yourself. If you're when I was big into performing and I was playing a lot of live shows, I would record myself and like analyze like not only how I'm playing, but how I'm moving because it's about entertainment. So similarly, yeah, I watch my stuff back and I try to find like mistakes. And also after a while, when you come back to something, because when you first are making the video, everything like makes sense to you. You've been thinking about it and you've been planning it out. Then I come back to it. I'm like, oh man, I didn't explain this concept nearly well enough. I missed a bunch of things. but also like I should have explained this before. I should have explained that before. And it really like it's not a pleasant thing to do, but it definitely teaches me a lot.
Yeah, when I sometimes do that, I find that it's not as bad as I think it will be, but I usually see that it's not like the videos that I watch on YouTube by the professional people, and that's what I'm trying to get at. It's just one of those
Hmm.
things. And you mentioned something interesting. You position yourself in the room so that it would look nice as opposed to necessarily finding the best sound. And it's usually some if you're doing just a song or if you are doing voiceover, then I don't think you have to care about that much. You can record in the closet if it sounds better. But when you're doing video, how do you find that balance? I mean, sometimes the best looking scenario is the worst sounding one, and that is also true of film. So do you sometimes say, "Oh, we can we move this camera here so that I can stand there and pick up better sound," or is that something that doesn't happen?
You mean in
And
films?
in both when you are doing these sorts
Mm.
of small things that we are doing, and in films as well.
In films, nobody cares about sound. You are literally it's most of the time. And I mean, there are literally a few directors that really care about sound, and they are known for this. Tarantino is one of them. He doesn't like ADR. He wants to record everything like perfect on set. Most people don't care about audio on film sets. It's not their priority. Their priority is getting a good image, and they can always fall back on post. But also newer filmmakers, not only they don't care about sound, they don't understand sound. They've never thought about sound. They just think sound happens. And they don't exactly understand how it happens. So you're actually like a lot of the times it feels like you're an annoyance. You're like in their way. So yeah, you're not a priority. They're never gonna change a shot because of the way it sounds. They're never even gonna try to like like you go shoot in a house. The best thing to do is to shut off the AC, unplug the fridge, get rid of all those sounds. But sometimes they don't care. They don't do it. They would rather have AC and noise in the audio versus good audio and no AC. Or like in the middle of a shot, people are like walking around, people are whispering to each other. Some of it is just a must. Like the director is communicating something to the first AD. That's just gonna happen. You can't do anything about it. And you get very little input too, like on set. The best filmmakers would have a meeting before. So before they plan out the shot, they're already talking to somebody doing audio. There, it's time to like have an input. Be like, hey, maybe this shot where you're talking about all these important like plot points, maybe it can be instead of them walking down the stairs of this large marble staircase, maybe they can be sat down on the bottom. But once the shots are planned, once the cinematographer like has that thing in mind, they're not going to make any sacrifices for the sound. For my own like videos, I mean, I don't think my videos sound particularly good, and I don't think they look particularly good. But definitely, I think like it looks better with this brick wall behind me versus just these like single color, like light blue wall that's behind me, even though that would sound better if my camera was pointed that way. Um, yeah, so I think it needs to look decent. Like looks matter because they don't matter to me, but I know that it matters. And I read an essay about this, how humans used to be, how we used to have like an audio or a sound-based culture. So, we would pass down stories and skills, all those things we would pass down with sound by speaking and by hearing them. Um, like our traditions were a lot more oral. Our brains were working a lot more with audio. Nowadays, our brains, like culturally speaking, societally speaking, we are much more like getting a lot more out of our eyes than we get out of our ears. So with audio, you're in this awkward position. Like I need to like I need to, it's almost like you need to have a mixer in your shot or people think you're not legit, even if you're not using a mixer at all. Because people think with their eyes, they want to see somebody in a studio with like four speakers around them, and they want to see all these things that don't actually matter. Like I'm teaching the DAW, who cares what my interface is, but people care.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, it is easier to care about this than to actually train your ears to be able to tell good from bad. So there is
hmm
that. I find it very hard to tell things like we were talking about EQs yesterday, and you could hear some things that I just can't.
Mm.
And yeah, so another thing is so let's get back to no before I get back to microphones, I guess I have another question. How much of what we hear in movies, I find that the sound is sometimes even more important than the image, but it seems like people who are producing the movies don't necessarily agree with that. And how much of what we hear in the movies is like a boom mic, the traditional thing that I think of is like a person holding a boom mic, but I know that there are
hmm
other solutions. Like you can use a lav mic, and you can put that concealed, of course, but you can put that a lav mic just like this one on the actors, and you can do ADR, so
hmm
you can just record people on post production. So how much of what we hear is on set versus ADR, and how much of it is this traditional boom thing versus this other shenanigans?
hmm It really changes based on like genre and stuff. So if you're talking about a Marvel film, 0% is on-set sound. They still do on-set recording. They may even use like sound, like so they use the production sound mostly for like the sound effects that were there, if any, which again most of it would be CGI. But yeah, like some films are shot with the knowledge that it will all be ADR. Some films less. So like and yeah, I was initially kind of surprised to see which films are like all ADR or which TV shows are all ADR. So The Office, it's all ADR. Like I would say 100% ADR.
That is
And they
crazy.
always knew it. They always knew. It's crazy, right? Um, and yeah, but then when you get to kind of like more drama style films, you get a lot. So, I mean, yeah, Tarantino films are one example where you would hear a lot of production sound. And that's because he's a big stickler for that kind of stuff. He doesn't like ADR, so he makes sure to get that good sound. But yeah, like on a set of an action film, you got so imagine a car chase scene. No dialogue there is going to be recorded. Any scene on a boat, a plane, none of the sound is going to be usable. Most outdoor scenes are not going to be usable in post. Um, I'm trying to think of like what's an example of somebody that uses a lot of production sound. Um, I was watching shit. What's that show called? They all die and they go to heaven, but it's not heaven. The Good
Yeah,
Place.
you
I was
you
watching The
spoiled
Good Place,
you
and they
spoiled the
seem to
plot of
use.
the first season there, but yeah, it's the good
Oh
place.
no! Oh no!
I didn't watch
Oh,
it, but my
sorry. I
wife
shouldn't do that.
said that, and my wife watched, so I know the plot.
Yeah. So yeah, they use a lot of production sound, and then when you say boom versus lav, the preference is boom.
Can you tell? Can you tell?
Because the
But when
boom
you
is
are watching
constant.
something, can you tell that something is ADR versus not?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are the telltale signs?
If it's done So if it's done really well, if they really try to conceal that it's ADR, it could be somewhat tricky. But well, I mean, you can get a lot of visual cues. So yeah, again, if it's a scene in a street with people walking, that's not going to be production. If it's a scene where the camera is moving, that's probably ADR because when the camera moves, so is the sound guy moving. So two people are walking and talking in Game of Thrones or whatever. but also there's a cam operator moving, there's a focus puller moving, there's a first AD walk in, there's a boom op walk in, there's a sound mixer. All these people are walking on this gravel road. So the production sound will be 7 footsteps plus the like first AD going, watch out, there's a thing behind you. And like people are literally talking to each other on set as the scene is going. Maybe they're whispering. So all of that will be production sound. And you start to hear the different, like you start to hear the ADR room, and there's like a slight reverb around it, but it's very, like it's somewhat more disconnected versus like a sound that's the sound and the noise and the reverb are like baked in together. You know what I mean?
And
Yeah, you start to be able to tell, and it kind of ruins it a little bit for you as well.
that is fascinating. And it seems like it's a lot more work to do ADR. So couldn't you get away with other solutions like this?
And I mean, they try to do in lower budget films. In higher budget films, they just know that that would be the best sound, so they get the ADR.
And is it always the
With
actor, or
lavs too,
sometimes
like
like they find someone else to do ADR?
no, I think it almost needs to be the actor.
I mean, at this point, I don't know
I
anymore.
think
It's just
there's
like, did you watch BoJack Horseman? There
yeah.
is this bit that I think he like goes to a rehab or just disappears from LA,
Hmm.
and but before he went, people took many shots of him from all angles, so they finished the movie without him with CGI.
Uh-huh.
It's that movie about the Secretariat, the horse, the running horse. So
Uh-huh.
they finished without BoJack, and I'm like, is everything fake now? Do I really know the voice of Tom Hanks?
Yeah. No, the voice would be the voice, and there's actually some union restrictions on that. So you can't replace the voice of one person that has an on-screen speaking role with the voice of another person unless it's consensual. So there is some limitation, and most of the time people voice themselves. And obviously, good actors are really gifted at doing really good ADR. That's hard to tell, like at least in terms of matching like lip movements and stuff like that. But you start to pick up clues. Like one thing is on set. This happens a lot. Like on set, you see a person like touching their face, and so if it was production audio, like you wouldn't hear the face touching per se, but you would hear the hand for that moment that it kind of goes over,
Mm.
and if you don't hear that, that's a telltale sign. And just quality, like big scenes with smaller reverbs, you can tell that the quality is just too good. If it's too good to be true, it is.
I'm going to watch some movies thinking about this now. That's going to be my homework, and I'll try to tell,
Hmm.
and I'll try to come up with proofs like the things you're mentioning. If I see some mismatches, and Bo
Hmm.
is saying on the chat that mic proximity is a good clue, because I suppose that in a studio for ADR you are going to use studio microphones, maybe not the kinds of microphones you would use on set, right?
No, you try to match. So yeah, like you try to actually when you do ADR, very often you're recording with, if possible, you're recording with the same boom, same lav.
Mm.
You're recording both. Um, but yeah, like I think what Bo is saying is like, yeah, if it's a wide shot, then it's two possible answers. If they're using production sound, they're using the sound from another like close up scene, because the boom up is just too far. Um, so yeah, if you see like a wide shot and two people are talking, that's not going to be the production sound, because the production sound for that will not be great. There are tricks, like people come from below, or if it's like at a table, you can also plant mics at the table. That to me is the best sound. And again, that's possible only if the filmmakers care about sound. So they include you in the early planning stages. So you can go, hey, like while you're doing this set design, like can we plant mics around? So I worked on a film where it's like this hacker. that's walking another person through this bank as they're trying to like break into it. So I told them, well, hey, your hacker is literally wearing headsets and a mic. You know, let's just record that. Let's just make that sound awesome. And then the sound for that was awesome. And they could use production sound because they planned it with that in mind. Or, you know, I could put a mic like right in front of them, just off screen. I could point a boom mic at them like from above or something. So yeah, with planning, you can use production sound. I kind of forgot what your initial question, or yeah, so what Bo was saying, yeah. So if in a close shot, it could be that the sound you're hearing, you can point the boom mic really close to the person. In a far shot, it won't be the same sound from that scene, either from another scene or it'd be ADR.
You just told that when you are on set, you're kind of a nuisance. People don't really want to care about the sound when you're on set. And one of the fun things is to try to find the boom mic in a shot, just poking. So what is the
Yeah.
vibe in the studio when that happens and they notice? Because sometimes it goes unnoticed, but when people notice, is it like, oh, come on, man?
It's honestly not on the sound person, because like what happens again is and you got to kind of really annoy them with this. I always do. I go, I forget what you say actually. But you get, can I get a shot? Something like that. So basically what happens is they have the camera pointed. Sometimes it's possible for you to be behind the monitor. So if I'm like recording something in front of me, I will do like this and I'm watching the monitor there. So I can kind of like look at the shadow myself, but basically you bring the mic in until it's completely in the frame, and then you slightly back it off as the cinematographer is saying in, and then they say out. So that's your border. But if the shadow is being cast somewhere, they need to see it on set and they need to recognize it. If they miss it, they are to blame. And then when you have like light setups that are really panoramic, then if you're booming from above, you're gonna be casting a shadow somewhere. So you go from below. So you point the mic like from below up. Sometimes I'm like under the table, pointing my mic, just holding my mic and pointing it at people. Yeah, I do whatever to get like really good sound, to get as close to them as I can, even if I have to go under the table.
What is the most ridiculous
was one,
situation
like,
you have been to pick up that good sound?
It was this sex scene. Well, it wasn't a sex scene per se. It was a post-sex like cuddle scene. So obviously, like both actors are under blankets, so lavs are useless. They're gonna just pick up the rustling from blankets, and the camera was like on a stand above them, and I wanted to be like on the side of the bed pointing towards them, but I was just not getting the good enough sound. And then I knew I didn't want to like make it awkward and like kind of get in bed with them, but that would have been the best choice. So finally, I think one of the actors suggested it. He was like, "What if you stand on the bed?" So I was standing on my bed with my legs open, and their legs were going through my legs, and I was like pointing the boom right at them.
That is crazy. Does it matter when I'm operating a
Yeah.
mic? This is the kind of mic that you would use on set, right? Does it matter if I have
Yeah.
it on like I have it over here on the table, or if I put it? I have another light that I didn't show. I shouldn't be moving the microphone as I am speaking, but I have another light over here. And does it make a difference if it's on the table, on the desk here? I shouldn't move that way. Okay, so yeah, if it's on the desk versus on a light stand or even below, I mean, I cannot go below, but does it make any difference?
So below is the least ideal, and above technically is the most ideal, just because of the way like sound travels. So like, you know, the best place to put a lav, if visuals were not an issue, is right here. So if people are wearing hats, you can do this. You can tape a lav like right here. Then the next best place is like the chest right here. Um, but yeah, like above is always better. So you should definitely do tests, but I think like your position is pretty good because you're like it's right in front of you, is pointing close to you. I don't know if you go from above, if you can maintain the same distance. If you can maintain the same distance, it could sound slightly better. And the other thing with putting stuff on the table is, so I have this mic stand. It's for a kick mic, actually. So I don't use the traditional boom arm things that most people use. A, because they're more expensive. But B, I really like this because if I bang on my table, you won't get that low end traveling through the mic stand into the mic, right?
I mean, how come?
So
It
that's
is
an issue.
the
Like
mic
as
is
you,
on the table. I mean, if I bang on my table, you hear it.
yeah, because your stand is very
Ah,
small.
okay.
So my stand has this absorbing kind of foot
Mm.
on it. So it's absorbing, and it's designed for kicks and stuff. So it's absorbing a lot of what's coming from like my table to the mic. I mean, you still pick up the sound of it, but you're not picking
The
up like the
rumble.
vibration of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rumble. So you have that risk, but again, like I think also convenience matters. So like, so what if there's a little rumble every once in a while in your recording? Like, is it a big issue that you need to solve where it will sound bad, or is it like a cosmetic choice, you know?
Yeah, so I have another stand here that I want to show. It's this thing. So
Okay.
I showed this in a video before, and what this is an IKEA lamp that I took
Oh,
the
okay.
lamp
I thought
out,
so. Yeah.
and it turns out it's the perfect stand for one of these microphones. It works so well.
Nice.
And I don't think it has that same
Nice.
absorption, but it is heavy, so it doesn't tip over.
Mm-hmm.
And I could put some kind of foam below it, and it's just one of these things. I can just move it around, and when I position it, it just stays there, which I find very convenient. And I used to use this
That's
for
awesome.
YouTube, but I decided not to continue using it for two reasons. The first is aesthetics,
Mm-hmm.
because I would be in the shot with a microphone like this, like you are right now. And I thought, yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a look these days. I think that the kind of tutorial thing that we do and programming and whatnot, it seems to be the look on YouTube. But the more important reason is to pick up good sound with this microphone. So for people who don't know, this is like
Mm-hmm.
the industry standard for, I guess, live shows and performances. It
Mm-hmm.
is, I cannot seem to get the cable out. It's the Shure SM58. Um, yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
probably have seen this like this in many places before. So in any case, to get a good sound out of this, I would need to be close to it, very near the microphone. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
about, I guess, the distance that you are, about this distance. And if I
Mm-hmm.
went much further from the microphone, I would get a lot more of the room. But the problem is, if I am too
Mm-hmm.
close to the microphone, you get all those mouth sounds, like the clicks and the thumb
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And that can sound distracting and bad. And also, it would pop. I mean, I had this piece of foam on the microphone, but still,
Mm-hmm.
it would pop. So, what are
Mm-hmm.
your advices or ideas in terms of this? If you had the options, would you prefer to use one of these shotgun mics, or do you think that using
Mm-hmm.
one of these would be better?
Yeah, like with SM58s, is like the cancellation is just insane, right? So even if you turn your head like 30 degrees, you kind of start to hear like both a change in amplitude, but also you're hearing a difference in like the frequency content, right? As you kind of move around. For pops, so I mean the SM7B, this is just like the fat cousin of the SM57 and 8 as well. Um, the cancellation is a lot less, but it's still like, yeah, like kind of I showed you. If you move too much in either direction, you start to not hear it. But also to avoid pops, what I do is I don't do dead on. so I'm not fully on axis. I'm like 15-ish degrees off axis. So if I say something like Peter Pan, Pied Piper, it's less than if I go Peter Pan, Pied
Yeah, I can
Piper.
hear that
So
even through the
dead
stream.
on, yeah, because you're sending the air right into the diaphragm versus like a lot of the air goes this way, but the P is still picked up when you go that way. So slightly off axis helps with dynamic mics. Um, yeah, I think like you should A B with your two mics, but definitely the shotgun one. I think you will like the sound more um,
Why is that?
than SM58. I think because this sounds really good and it sounds very constant. So as you're kind of like moving around, sometimes you're like turning to look at the camera and sometimes you're like a little further away. The sound profile doesn't change too much. With SM58, it would change a little bit. And actually, one way to test it is do like a take with both of them, and then in post just sit and kind of like analyze which sound you like the
I have
best.
spent so
Um,
many nights doing this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What were your findings?
Well, I mean, at this point, I think I prefer the shotgun as well. Uh, for the reasons you mentioned, because it's not in the shot and it is more convenient. It's this thing on the side as opposed to being in front of me, in front of the keyboard, even. So it is more out of the way. And in terms of sound, I think that I actually prefer the sound of the SM58. It sounds more present, more in your face, while this, it may even, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
maybe sound more natural. It probably sounds like
Mm-hmm.
if you were here with me in the room. But I kind of, that's another thing. I kind of
Mm.
don't like my voice. I think it's too high pitched, and the proximity effect on the SM58, because I was so close to it, I would get more of the bass sound. And I think that kind of
Mm-hmm.
helps with my voice. So if I were to do something that is not on camera, I would probably use the SM58. And I put the pop filter and I was trying to address it from the side, but I guess I am just a
Mm-hmm.
person who pops a lot. Is that something that happens? Do
Mm-hmm.
some people just blow more air when they are speaking?
For sure, yeah. And even just now, as I was like doing the demonstration, when you become aware of your P's, you say them a lot softer. But then in the heat of the moment, you try to pop more, like it always happens. And yeah, some people are more SC, some people are more. So I have, I don't know how much from my camera you can tell. I have a big gap in my teeth. People with gap teeth are always very SC. Our S's are more kind of sharp. Some people are more PE if they have like bigger lips, bigger mouths. Yeah, so definitely different people have different amounts of trouble with like plosives and sibilants and stuff like that based on just the way our teeth and our mouths are shaped and their size and all of that. Um, it's interesting that you think that you felt your SM58 to sound more natural, because I always feel like dynamic mics have a very unnatural sound to them compared to a
Oh no, no,
shotgun.
no.
Like a
I
shotgun
said that
picks up a little bit of,
the shotgun sounds more natural. I think the shotgun sounds more like you would hear me in
yeah.
the room, but the SM58 sounds more
Okay.
pleasing. I mean, I think it helps me. I think that the
Uh-huh. Okay.
proximity effect and the bassier sound. So, for people who don't know, when you speak closer to a microphone that has this pattern, this cardioid pattern, we talked about the polar pattern. If you speak closer to it, you hear more of the bass frequencies, and I think that it helps me
Mm-hmm.
because of my voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Like yeah, the shotgun mic will always kind of sound more natural, which is nice. Um, this is why with the SM57 too, or sorry, the SM7B that I have, at the begin, like in my early tutorials, I would get right up on it, and I'm trying to take some distance because it just yeah, it makes it sound slightly more natural, even though slightly more echoey. And even if you watch my tutorials with headphones on, you would definitely sometimes hear the tail of a word that itself has been cut out is still in the recording as the next word is coming, but I don't care too much.
Okay, so now I switched, and it seems like I'm too quiet. So how does that
Hmm.
sound? I think that is about okay. So now I switched to the SM58 using through Skype and through a YouTube stream. Can you all hear this? Do you hear a difference?
Hmm. I hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a lot more boom in the low end. Definitely a little more of a, of a phone-like sound,
A phone like
if that
sound.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Like
That's
your sound is all going through one point and coming out of one point, you know what I
that's
mean?
what I feel about this microphone, which is a microphone that I guess that's another thing about audio production. We spend a lot of money. So I bought this microphone and I never used it because I thought that it sounded like I was in a I was coming from a phone. And I don't know. I
Mm,
looked at the frequency spectrum. It looked okay. There was no cutoff, obvious cutoff anyway. But I just maybe it's because I was comparing it to other microphones. I was not just recording a video and then watching it and trying to see if it sounded okay. I was
mm,
recording A, B, C, D, E with all the microphones I had, and this one sounded tiny. I don't know. It doesn't sound too nice. But now then you're saying
mm.
that about the SM58, which I thought would sound more present, more uh, well. It's hard to describe qualities of sound, but I think it would sound nicer.
What lav is it? What's the brand and stuff?
It is the Smart
Is it
Lav.
Sennheiser?
No, it's a Rode microphone. It's a Smart
Oh,
Lav.
oh. What I know is good labs are really expensive and cheaper labs are not almost never good. Um, so like yeah, like really good lav mics, like RCAs, sorry, DPAs, not RCAs. DPAs are really amazing and they cost you like 1,500, including the transmitter and receiver. They're also wireless. They just sound amazing. um, Road should sound good. Where were you placing your lav?
Well, about
Like on
the
the lapel
chest,
of your
yeah,
shirt?
chest position, not on my
Uh-huh.
forehead. But we can try that.
Hmm. Yeah, try like it's also about like the way kind of like so I have a bassier sound than you. So when I have lavs on my lapel, it sounds a little boomy to me because there's a lot of like low end vibration on my vocal cords right here that I can feel. I put it slightly to the side, and that makes it better. The downside to that is if I lean this way versus this way, it sounds different.
Mm.
But if you're more or less kind of like looking dead on, just slightly to the side. Um, yeah, I guess slightly to the side is just a really good trick for a lot of things sounding a little better. It's almost like when you're dead on, it's too microphony. I don't
Ah.
know. I have no scientific way to back this up, but I always try to be a little to the side, a little off axis,
So
just
just
slightly.
like I am right now. So I am about like 3 fingers away from the microphone and it's
Hmm.
off to the side. So I think that this is like the ideal position for the kind of thing that we are doing here. And Bo says that he
Hmm.
can hear more of the upper mids with the SM58. Uh, I was expecting
Hmm.
more of the
Good
bass,
point.
but that's fair. And do you hear pops?
Definitely more of the bass. Pied Piper.
Peter Pan.
Yeah, I hear it that way. One trick is you put your hand in front of your mouth and you go Peter Piper, Peter Piper, Peter Piper, and you move your hand until it's like a breeze,
Hmm.
like not like a Peter Piper here. I'm just hearing a lot, feeling a lot of air, and you go Peter Piper.
Peter Piper. Peter Piper. I guess it's about here. So let's
Yeah,
do
a
that.
slight breeze.
So let's do this. Now it's even off the shot. Doesn't show up in the camera anymore. But
Hmm.
now it's too quiet. So that's another thing about the SM58 and dynamic mics in general. They seem to
Hmm.
need more gain, right? they push the preamp
Mm-hmm.
harder, and then you get some hiss and self noise, especially on this Zoom recorder that I have here. It's not, I think, the ideal audio interface for this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's because how much do you know about like the electronics of dynamic mics versus like an Omni mic
I know very little.
or not an Omni mic, but condenser? Yeah, so dynamic mics kind of work similarly to a guitar pickup. So there's like a coil inside there that's been wound, and so what happens is it need well, first of all, um, it's a lot harder to push the diaphragm all the way. So it's really hard to make them clip. That's why people use SM58s when they are recording like gunshots or, big car engines from really up close, because it's really hard to like drive the diaphragm all the way in. Um, but at the same time, with quieter sounds, it needs more power because it's working off of the like electromagnetic field that it's creating. Um, so with dynamic mics, as you're recording like things that are kind of a little quiet, you need to give them a lot of power. And our voice in the grand scheme of sounds is pretty quiet, compared to even an acoustic guitar, but definitely compared to drums or whatever. So yeah, you need to drive it a lot. I don't have this problem too well, apparently I do, I guess. I have this problem with my SM7B, as people pointed out in yesterday's live stream. I was a little quiet.
Or maybe I was too loud. I
I
don't know.
compressed the hell
That's
out of
another thing we can talk about. Usually I try to reach about -18 when about
Mm-hmm.
-18, -15 dB, and for that, for people who are interested and have this kind of equipment, I have to go to like 60 or 70% of the gain here on this Zoom recorder. So it is pretty
Mm-hmm.
high, and I think that I can
Mm-hmm.
hear the self noise. I think, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, and you hear that noise, like that noise is gonna be there to us to an extent. I also have Zoom preamps. I think this is like one version ahead, um, preamps. So I have it also has like a compressor. So I have my compressor at 12 o'clock, so halfway, and it's a set compressor. It's 4-to-1. And I have my gain at just like 2 o'clock. So almost 3/4 of the way. I'm driving it, and I don't really have a problem. I can always kind of compress more in post. I aim if it's just my voice, I actually aim for way more. I aim for like -6 or something,
Hmm.
at the loudest. And in my tutorials, I try to even do -3, and that's mostly because of phones. Like if somebody's watching my tutorials on their phone, which is, I don't know, ill-advised, but definitely happens, you need to be a lot louder, um, for them to like hear properly. So yeah, I try to mix my voice to like -6, -5 even sometimes. So I have a limiter that's driving it up.
Yeah. So the way that I used to do it is I would record trying to reach -20, -18. Then I would put the thing in Reaper,
Mm-hmm.
and I would use an effect called a tri-leveler by Sonic Anomaly. It is a
Mm-hmm.
JS effect, and it's three compressors in a row, and one is fast, one is
Mm-hmm.
slower, that sort of thing. But the cool thing about this compressor is that you can tell it that you want it to produce sound at -16 lufs or -14 lufs. And then,
Mm-hmm.
as I heard, YouTube expects you to be at -13 lufs. So I would put at -13, but then it
Mm-hmm.
sounded very hot. It wasn't clipping, but it sounded very hot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I love the sound of that. And in the end, YouTube is going to push up your sound levels anyway if it's too quiet. So you don't watch a video on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
and you go to the next one and it's super loud. So they normalize anyway.
Mm-hmm.
but you seem not to be. And that's another thing we can talk about. I used to do a lot of processing in the audio. I have a video in my channel in which I describe the chain I used to use. So I was using the SM58, and one
Mm-hmm.
obsession I have is I would like to have only the sound of my voice in the video, and I would try to record at home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm recording at home, and it's also a rental. I don't own this place, and so I could not
Mm-hmm.
make permanent changes to the room. That's why I just have some blankets, and I also have a baby in the house, and I would try to record, and sometimes the baby is crying, and I would like to for the baby not to be heard. So I would record with
Mm-hmm.
SM58 super close, and that's another thing we can talk about. I had those condenser microphones. I started with the Blue Yeti because everyone on the internet uses the Blue Yeti. I
Mm-hmm.
tried the
Yeah.
AT2020 by Audio Technica, and they all
Audio
yeah, they
Technica.
all
Uh-huh.
sound like shit because they pick up
Mm.
everything. I mean, it would pick up the
Yeah.
neighbor's baby crying. So for this kind of
Yeah.
situation, I don't know why people talk about the Blue Yeti. It's just a waste of money. I sold mine. I usually just keep collecting microphones, even the ones I never used.
Mm-hmm.
But that those ones I just had to sell. They don't work for the kind of thing I do. Maybe if I had a soundproof room and I had like, but that's not the reality. Do you have lots of microphones, or do you
Yeah.
just the one that you use?
I have an embarrassingly small amount now. I didn't bring all my mics to Montreal either. I left some of them with a buddy of mine. He's like pseudo renting them from me. He's just in return, he's just sharing some of his plugin licenses with me. But what I have here is this one, the SM7B. I have a Rode. Let me bring them. One, two, and where is number three? Right here. So I got my trusty boom slash ADR slash Foley mic. This is the Rode NTG3. So it's a shotgun mic. These grates on the side, as yours has, they create like a lot of cancellation. So that's how they achieve a kind of super cardioid sound. And it's really good. It's really good for like um, doing Foley. It's very live sounding. Really great for like, I mean, if I do any production sound gigs, I would use this, and then so I would also use this for ADR. For tutorials, if you're really close to this, yeah, you're picking up every click, every pop, everything. And if I put it too far, it's just too boomy. There was one day I lent this out to a friend and I recorded one of my tutorials with it, and I don't like the sound of it. It's way too roomy for me. But love this mic. It's a really good like all-purpose mic. Also great for overheads on a drum. Also great for acoustic guitar. Really good for like a horn section where you don't want a really intimate close-up sound. I got this, which is Zoom H3VR. So it's a ambisonics mic. So you got four mics, and it can also record binaural, and it could also record ambisonics. I do this for like I use this for field recordings, and I actually record music with it too. It's fun. Like if I go to a jam session or like any kind of busking drum circle type of thing, I just put this in the middle, and you can come home and through the software you can kind of spin around the room. It's really fun. Um, and I got this when I was working on a video game. And in films and stuff, it's very rare that you get to like play with ambisonic stuff. But I can still also record like four channels of audio with this, and then throw two away and be stereo, or just in a 5.1. I have like I can export a 5.1 audio file. I got this Sennheiser, which is my amp mic. You just dangle this on the amp, and it picks it up. Again, super sensitive, so you need to drive it to hell to pick up any kind of sound from it, and it needs to be really close. So really, kind of, it just has a single purpose of an amp.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't even know why I brought this. This would have been one of the things I could keep back in Vancouver. I have a couple of SM58s and a couple of SM57s. And do I have anything else here? No, yeah, I don't have anything else. And then I have a AT2020. It's good room mic. I have a couple of MD421s by Sennheiser. They're good tom mics. I have an old D112, which is a good kick mic, but oddly enough, I record everything but a kick using that. So I like recording bass amps. I recorded a cello with it and it sounded really good. I actually put it like on the bottom of the cello on where I don't know the technical term for this, like where the strings come out of the body. I just rested it there and it picks up like really nice low end from the instrument. I actually don't like the sound of it on kicks. What else do I got? Yeah, I think that's about it. I have like 8 or 9 mics all told.
Yeah, well, it's more than I have, but then again, you record more things than I would ever record. So yeah, but I was saying that I have all these microphones because I was on a quest to try to be heard without the baby being heard. And I would muck with the sound a lot. I would do a lot of post-processing. I threw many of the RX from Isotope, many of the RX plugins. I would play with this compressor I mentioned and some crazy EQ curves I would find on YouTube, and I would try them. And what I learned is that, or at least the impression that I got, is that the more I put things on the effects chain, the worse it sounds. Maybe it's because I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe it is because the more you play with the sound, the worse it sounds. But if first of all, do you think it is possible to record with a baby in the room and through the right mic positioning and crazy effects chain? Do you think that it would be possible to get rid of the baby, or do you think that it's just embrace the baby?
Yeah, I mean, there's things you can do to minimize it. You can never eliminate it, that's for sure. And that just like I mean, the way to eliminate it is eliminating certain parts of your voice that shares its frequency content with the cry of the baby. So if you do that, you can like somewhat eliminate it. You can still never fully eliminate it. Even using RX and all that stuff, they're good at like denoising a constant thing. They take a profile. But a baby's cry is so complex. So the best thing is to shoot again. The second best thing is to like kind of try to deal with it using a mixture of like automation, a little bit of EQing. Even RX can help to a certain extent, especially if you have RX Advanced. You can like isolate the baby cry and just like remove it or trim it out. But again, you will definitely lose some overtones of your own voice. Yeah, I just don't think if a baby is near you, oh, there it is. Like even you're right now on the SM58,
Yes.
right? Yeah, it's being picked up. And especially like a baby's voice almost ranks near the top of the hardest things to eliminate, I would say. Like the sound of a coffee maker, a treadmill, even a motorbike or a car. It's still easier, but a car alarm, like forget about it. The sound is actually designed to be really hard to not hear. You know what I mean? And its frequency is smack in the middle of because a baby's cry is like, mama needs to hear, papa needs to hear, everybody needs to hear it. So it's just, the frequency is just so prominent in everything. It would be really hard to completely eliminate it.
I think
it's cute. It's like a cute part of your channel, I think. You know?
And I think that if you think about it from an evolution standpoint, it makes sense that this sound needs to be heard. And yeah, I think that it's a good sign baby's healthy.
Exactly.
And another question I have before we wrap it up, because I do need to go back to baby. Baby's missing me. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
so I guess and we are
Yeah.
going to keep doing this every Wednesday. There's still a lot I want to do. I do want to pick up the acoustic guitar. It's the only instrument that I really know how to play, but I want to know how to record it. So we are
Mm-hmm.
going to do that in the next weeks. But I do have one final microphone that I want to talk about, which is this one. It came with the Zoom recorder, and it's a field recording one.
Mm.
And I used it for a couple videos. It was positioned in the same place where the shotgun mic is and where the SM58 is. And I bought the shotgun that does not come with the recorder because I thought it would make a difference. I thought
Yeah.
it would sound. I thought the shotgun would sound better because the pickup, the polar pattern is completely different, and this is like to record a room, which is exactly what I don't want. I want to reduce the room and pick up my voice. But then I did an A/B between the
Mm-hmm.
shotgun and this one, and I couldn't really hear a lot of difference. Do you think that? So one of the goals I have with this series is to maybe prevent people from wasting money like I did on things like a Blue Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I was able to sell it very well on eBay because it seems like everyone wants a
Correct.
Blue
Uh-huh.
Yeti,
Nice.
even though I don't think it's a good microphone. I really dislike it, the sound of the
Mm-hmm.
Blue Yeti, but in any case, but I want to try to save people some money. So do you think that it's worth getting a mic like this if you already have like a mic like the one I showed and the mic that you are hearing right now, so you all can tell the difference? So I turned off the SM58 and I
Mm-hmm.
turned on this other microphone. Do you think that it's worth having a mic like this?
Um, yeah, I mean, so instantly your sound became stereo, right? And that also means that now distance and you tilting your head, all that stuff will have a separate, like big effect, a big impact on the final voice, right? So as you move further back, as you move to your right and left, those two different mics are picking up your sound at different parts of the cycle, and then that adds up to a sonic image that we're hearing. Um, so it, to me, a stereo mic unfocuses the center, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
So I don't know enough about cinematography to give a to give a good like visual example of this. Um, but yeah, like like there are lenses that are good for a close up, but they're not as wide. Then there are wider lenses. And then if you use wider lenses to do a close-up shot, it just looks a little bit off. So I think, yeah, like talk a little bit more, say
Yeah,
something,
so while I'm saying something
say
so
it.
you can tell this, another thing that I watched on YouTube about. So I have this microphone. It does not come with the recorder, and that's why I'm asking this because people who have bought
Mm-hmm,
the recorder, they may want to buy this or not. But another thing that
mm-hmm,
I see some people using is this. So I'm bringing this up so you can hear
uh-huh,
more of this stereo microphone. And this it's a dead cat. It's supposed to be used outside to um, take out some of the wind, but it seems like when you're outside,
mm-hmm,
you're not going to use this sound anyway. You're going to do ADR.
mm-hmm,
But more importantly, I see some people on YouTube using this indoors. And I tried it, and I was thinking maybe it's going to take out some of the room noise, but it doesn't make any difference at all. So I guess now you have two
mm-hmm,
questions to answer. One is the stereo microphone that we are using, and the other is this question.
mm-hmm. So okay, so the dead cat thing, well, their choice could be aesthetic. They could just like the fuzzy dead cat, and that's why they're putting it on the mic. It looks better to them. I like a naked mic. I like the look of it, but that could just be a reason. Could be that they just don't know. Could be that if they have like AC or a window open, that still makes a non-zero difference. But also you have a slight amount of high-end loss when you use a dead cat. Um, and yeah, so it's definitely a trade-off. If you don't have an AC active, there's no reason to use it indoors. Um, but yeah, it could just be an aesthetic choice. And yeah, your stereo mic, I mean, one thing to do to test actually Because I guess the difference between the XY pair versus the shotgun is well, one is two mics and one is one mic. But maybe you can record the XY and then just split it into mono and throw away one of the
which
channels.
is something I tried.
Then
Yeah,
you can really test. Uh-huh, you've tried it,
yeah.
right? So did you think that that was a negligible difference against the shotgun?
Well, it was different, and I bought the shotgun, so I thought that it would be better, and I kept using it. But it's not like, again, it's one of those things. If I just recorded a whole video, not A B comparing anything, just recorded a whole video, I'm not sure I would be able to tell. Which is, it's so interesting because when
Mm-hmm.
I record like using this microphone, I don't like the sound of it. But
Mm-hmm.
then I bought it because I watched some YouTube videos and the YouTube videos sounded nice. Do you think it's one of those self-critique
Mm-hmm.
things? Do you think it's psychological, or do you think that um, really there is a difference?
There's definitely a difference that like mathematically provable difference exists. Um, as far as like yeah, how we perceive our sounds and how each individual's taste is, and you definitely are less objective when it comes to your own voice. So that's always a factor. Like how you hear yourself is not like how anybody hears you. Um, and I actually have an idea for a mic about that, but maybe we can talk about it another time. Um, but yeah, like there's definitely a difference, and there's definitely maybe some things they are doing like production, but like in post production to make a lav sound better, and all of that. But yeah, I don't think that shotgun mic that you bought was like a bad investment because I really do like the sound of those things, and they really like those Zoom recorders are awesome because I think they opened up the world of field recording to a lot of people. Because before those, like you need two devices. You need a recording device and like device with preamps on it. You need a bunch of mics. You need all these cool carry bags and extra batteries, extra memory cards. You need a car to take all of those to a place. And they just made this like this goes in your bag. So they definitely like it's a leap, and it really opened up the world of field recording to a lot of people, which I think is a positive. And I've heard from people saying like they don't sound too different, the XY and the shotgun, when you just split out to a mono. And I think the difference will be shown if you do it outdoors versus indoors, and if you do it in a large space versus a small space. So your shotgun mic will be able to create a lot more cancellation because of its longer chamber and those grills versus the smaller mic. The smaller mic will be a more akin to your ears, what it picks up. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that answered
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
question.
And we were talking about the
Uh,
effects chain and how I used to put a lot of things in the chain. Now I'm not putting anything. In fact, in this
mhm.
stream, you are hearing exactly what is coming out of the microphone. Um,
Mhm.
but what does your effects chain look like? I know you're running a compressor, and do you usually go with RX
Uh-huh.
and the whole kit, or do you just put an EQ, a compressor, and that's that?
For my tutorials, what I use is, well, let me even bring up my chain so I can tell you exact Tomundo. Boop. Brr. So I do in post production, I do a vocal rider, and that's just, you can set a target volume, and that'll adjust your level to get to that target volume value, and that target value for me is 12. After that, I put an EQ.
That's a Waves plugin, right?
After that,
The
I put
vocal
a
rider is a Waves plugin. Okay,
yes,
so I know
yeah,
that one.
it's by Waves.
And in principle, it is similar
And I
to the
mean
tri-leveler.
JS. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I've never used the tri-leveler, but yeah, like the vocal writer is not doing anything too magical. That even like there's JSFX plugins that basically do a gain ride type of
Mm-hmm.
situation. Um, After that, it goes into an EQ, and after that, it goes to a de-esser. Then it goes to a denoiser, which is sometimes on and sometimes not. Right now, it's not on. Sometimes if I if while I was shooting, like my partner was cooking or something like that, I would have that on, but most of the time I won't bother. And then there's a compressor and then there's a limiter. And my compressor does an upward first, then a downward, then a huge downward in my limiter.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually do use a lot of processing in post for my videos. And yeah, I personally don't bother with declicking with my videos. I don't bother with declicking or any kind of like manual noise reduction. Um, because again, like it's tutorials, I think it doesn't matter too much. If I was, now I'm also starting a podcast, and for my podcast, I'm going through and I'm declicking everything. I also just record at a time, like I record late at night so that it's the quietest like environment possible. I get like closer to my mic and kind of try to be more quiet, and I would use less processing other than the declicks and all that stuff.
Yeah, so that's another thing about my setup. I don't have a lot of time. I mean, I do have a baby, so
Mm-hmm.
I tried to
Mm-hmm.
automate this as much as possible. So I was using the declicker, the deplosive, the denoiser, all those effects, but I was trying to find
Mm-hmm.
the ideal settings and never touch them again, which I don't think is the ideal use case for
Mm-hmm.
RX. Usually you go surgically and remove things by hand.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but do you think that there is a value in having this all these effects and just fine tuning them, finding the perfect settings and not touching them again? Or do you think it's just impossible? It's going to do more harm than good?
No, it's possible because your voice is a constant, your room is a constant. So yeah, you can definitely find settings. Like yeah, I have so early on in my tutorials, again, that was something I learned. I would kind of manually gain ride clips up and down. I was also just speaking a lot more. I would always start the tutorials kind of low energy and kind of shy, and by the end, I would warm up and speak louder and louder. So I would do all of that manually, and then so I got a little bit used to just trying to speak at a constant loudness. But also, yeah, like I was just spending way too much time like mixing it. And now that I have my chain, I rarely touch it. The only thing I touch is if I'm using the Z noise, I adjust the threshold and reduction amount. So two knobs that are moving of my entire setup, and the rest are all there. Because yeah, I don't want to spend time like mixing this. Um, for RX stuff, I don't know. How did you like with Deplosive? I usually just try to have an EQ on my low and just try to be kind of off axis. And while I'm recording, if I say a P that's way too plosive, I just repeat
Hmm.
that line again. Versus because repeating the line takes 3 seconds and anything else I do takes 4+ seconds.
Yeah, okay, so uh, it has been lovely talking to you. I think we'll wrap up now. I'll go back to baby.
Sure.
And how about next
Mhm.
week? I have so many ideas of
Okay.
things I would like to do, but I'll give you two ideas and then you help me decide. So, one idea is we could go
Okay.
through maybe OBS because we are streaming.
Hmm.
And we could go in OBS and look at the effects in OBS. And I know that there are plenty of videos online about how to configure compressors, EQs, and everything. But it would be nice to do this with you and go over the effects that you can use in OBS because there are some things that you can do in post that you cannot do live because of latency and whatnot.
Hmm.
So we could talk about the effects that come
Hmm.
with OBS, maybe some VSTs that we can load in. And right now you're just getting the raw sound from the microphone. Let's try to make it sound better. That's idea number one. Idea number two
Hmm.
would be to record acoustic guitar, which is a whole different can of worms. So
Hmm.
we would be doing like maybe using this stereo microphone, maybe using this, maybe using two SM58s. I actually have two of them, but those are the microphones that I have.
Cool.
So that that's what we have to play with. So which one do you want to do? Do you want to
Hmm.
do the effects chain or the acoustic guitar?
The acoustic guitar sounds like more fun,
Okay.
so I'm leaning towards that, but I'm down with either one.
Yeah, okay. So for next time, so before we leave, from all the gear that I do have, I mentioned everything I have. What do you think is the ideal? We tried all the different microphones I have, except for this one, which I cannot connect because I don't have the adapter, but I don't like the sound of it anyway. So from all these three options, the microphone that comes with the
Uh-huh.
field recorder, this one, and the SM58, which one do you think sounds best?
For acoustic
No, for the
guitar?
thing we are doing right now. So for the rest of the streams I'll do this
Oh,
week, which microphone do you think I should be using?
I really like the shotgun. Not a huge like right now you are using the XY,
Yes.
right? Yeah, so I think if I had to rank them, shotgun, then SM58, then the XY.
Yeah, that is my take on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Went back to SM58 now. But you think that the shotgun sounds
Mm-hmm.
better, and I agree. And you think that in terms of the room, what I could do to improve is to be in a corner as opposed to dead center in the middle of the room.
Yes, as a general rule, for the size of your room, the difference may be quite negligible, but if you like have time and curiosity to try it, it could be something to
Mm-hmm.
try. Um, just because your mic is now pointing at the largest like field in your room, if that makes sense. So it's going from one corner to the three corners. So if you reverse that, then it's just pointing to one corner. Um, for your room, it may be a negligible amount of difference, but yeah, if you got the time to give it a go, definitely worth a try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Bowie is asking on the chat, what kind of compressor are you using?
I use a good old C1 from by Waves in my chain. And yeah, so I basically use two of them. So one of them is doing upward, one of them is doing downward. And then I use the L1 um, as my final limiter. So I can show you the exact chain later if you want as
I
well.
mean, if you share your screen, you
I
can do it
think
right
it
now.
does. Oh yeah,
I
okay.
mean, I think we should be able to pull
Sure.
this off.
Sure. Oh wait, I keep clicking on GIMP. Uh, oh, on Skype, I just share my screen with you,
Yeah,
and that's rock and
yeah.
roll. Okay, cool.
Uh-huh. I do need a moment to set this up though. So let me see what I need to
Sure.
do. I need to change the source in OBS from your camera to this. And I don't see your computer. That's weird. What if I click
That's
OK?
strange.
Okay, if I click OK, then it works.
Oh,
And then I can make you full screen.
cool.
And I can take myself
Hmm.
out of the shot. Like so. So now you are, your computer is full screen on the stream.
Cool. So my own voice right now is going through just a stripped down version of this. But yeah, I got the vocal writer that goes through this EQ. That's just taking a little bit of nasalness out of my voice, taking a lot of low end out, and just kind of spicing up the high end a little bit. Um, this upon reflection is something I may want to get rid of. That goes through a de-esser, that goes through a denoiser, and then the first compressor that I have, the threshold is really low. It may be too low actually right now. I would put it like around here. And the ratio is 0.8 to 1. So it's boosting as we pass the threshold. So below the threshold is all the noises when I'm quiet. Then it just takes the quietest parts of my sound, like consonants, and sounds like at the end of task or ask. They get so quiet, they almost become just a breath. or the th sound. So the upwards is pushing all of this up. Then the downward is starting at this with a threshold around, and again, this can be a little lower, like something like this. Ratio is pretty high, like 7-ish. Attack should be around 10 or whatever. So then that's taking the upper parts of the loudest vowels, like ah and how are you and all of that, and it's bringing all of those down. And then it's got a little bit of makeup gain, and then that would feed into a limiter. And the limiter, I basically kind of see, the ceiling of my sound theoretically is around -20, minus all the stuff that gets past my compressor because the attack is like around 10. So then my limiter, I will put the threshold around -10 and just set the ceiling to what I want it to be output, which I set it to 6. So my limiter is also doing another kind of 4 dB of boost on top of that. I don't have my limiter on this project because right now this is live, and I don't, limiter would introduce latency when it's true peak.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I want to talk about when eventually we get to this topic, which is this difference between what you do in post as opposed to what you do when you're live. So now I do need to change a few things so you can see you again. Is this it?
Should I unshare my
That
screen?
may help, but I also need to change the source, and I already did. So now you are on the screen again.
There you go.
Yeah, so for next week, we will record acoustic guitar. And what do I need to do to prepare? I mean, I will bring in the guitar. It's over there in the closet. I will, of course, prepare something to record. And I will set everything up in terms of routing microphones and everything. But what space do I need to prepare? What kinds of microphones? I mean, from the options we have 2 SM58s. We have this one that comes with the Zoom. We have this one. Which microphones do you want me to set up and how?
Yeah, I definitely think we should do... Well, unfortunately, I guess we can't use your shotgun and your stereo mic together. So that's a little bit of a bummer because they both feed into the... Yeah. So I would say let's try your shotgun. Did you say you have an AT2020?
I had it, but I sold it because it picked up too much of the space.
Oh, you no longer have it. So I guess let's do the SM58 plus the shotgun mic. And we'll try a few different placements of it. And if we didn't like the sound of that, then we can just try with the XY pair, just get a classic kind of stereo sound. If you can, find a stool. Stools are better than chairs, fewer moving parts, so less like squeak possible. And then do you have a kind of a classic mic stand like that goes on the floor versus on your table?
I don't have. I have 2 of these, the Heck IKEA ones, but I don't have. And I do have things that I can prop, so I can put like this on my desk, and they will reach about the same space as a regular mic stand.
Okay. So do we need to be near your table to use the stands?
Not necessarily. I can just put chairs around the room or whatever.
Okay. Maybe we can even kind of move around your room a little bit next week and find a place. My instinct tells me just kind of moving your mattress to the corner where there's the moving blankets too, and just having it at an angle. So the mattress is at like a diagonal angle and you're just in front of it. That's what my instinct says. But we can try like different placements, just kind of walk around your room and see where the best spot would be.
I mean, of course I could just go buy more mic stands and I could go buy more stuff. But I guess one thing that I do want for this series of videos is to try to make do with what we have, which I think is so important. It's so easy to go buy more gear and then you're like, oh, but it doesn't sound that good. I think it's much better to just learn how to use the gear that I do have. And if we find that we really do need to buy something, we will. But let's try to make do with just chairs, propping, mic stands, and all these sorts of
Yeah.
shenanigans that I have in my room here, like this kinds of. Oh, the feed is no longer working. Isn't that something? The camera is no longer connected. Oh, it is connected again. There you go. So these are the lights that I have,
Now it
and
works.
I
Yeah.
have some kids things here and a TP house and everything. We'll try to do
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try
MacGyver.
to do the same vibe here with the recording. We'll just prop things on chairs and uh, to do the real thing. That's what happens when real people are trying to
Yeah.
do real things and they don't have a huge budget.
Yeah, definitely. The first book on something's, I'll tell you something super embarrassing. My speakers were not off this whole time. I just noticed this, which is super embarrassing in a live stream talking about audio and talking about how sensitive my ears are to everything. I thought it's just because of the slight latency that is being caused because I'm monitoring you through myself. But anyway, yeah, the first book that really got me into production was this book called Gorilla Sound Recording. And it was exactly about this. It's like you don't have a studio, you can't afford a studio, you have a mic and you have a broken stereo and you have a bunch of cables that may not even be compatible with your interface. Let's make an album. And it just really taught me a lot. So yeah, so I like guerrilla recording. Let's make do with what we have, and later we can decide to buy more mics. That's also
Yes,
fun.
I mean, yeah, it is fun to spend money with these things, but it's usually not worth it. So, yeah, Arya, thank you very much for
Yeah,
being here with me today. It has been a blast, and I'm looking
my
forward to
pleasure.
do this Wednesday nights. And I thank you all who came here, Bo, Brian the One, Intro Automaker, Nathan. Thank you all for being here and chatting with us. We will be doing this every Wednesday, 5:30 UTC. Um, we will record some things. I mean, next week we will do a recording. We will set up Reaper and the microphones, and we will move around the room and find what works best and do some posts as well. We'll throw some effects in, and we'll try to make do with the equipment that I have here already, but I will also try to make do with the effects that I have, which is I did buy a lot
Hmm.
of audio effects as well. But how about we try to just use things
Hmm.
that are free? So how about that? That I think could be a fun challenge. So we will
Sure.
only use effects that are free. Mostly the effects that come with Reaper, if we can work with them, but otherwise we'll try to just come
Sure.
up with free VSTs and try to make a song or a short song or a jingle or something.
Sure.
To try
Sounds
to make
awesome.
something. We'll make something next week. Um, yeah. So
Cool.
thank you all for being here, for subscribing to the channel, for supporting me and Arya on PayPal, Patreon, those sorts of things. And if you don't know IDDQD sound, you are missing a lot. You should go there and watch Arya talk about Reaper and about programming,
Get in there.
which is a spin-off. But now we have a lot of great content there as well. And I see you all tomorrow over here on my channel. I'll continue working on this other project I am running. It's a coding thing. I'm programming an app. And I see you all, I guess, Tuesday on Arya's channel. We'll talk about EQs over there. And yeah,
Woo!
see y'all
Excited.
later. Bye.
See